Is breaking news, so we're going to go straight to it. Israeli military fires deputy commander as it releases findings of investigation into deadly attack on aid workers. The Israeli military has said its investigation into the killing of aid workers in Gaza has found there were several professional failures, breaches of orders, and a failure to fully report the incident. A commanding officer will be reprimanded and a deputy commander will be dismissed following the military investigation, according to the Israel Defence Forces. Let's discuss this with Tal Hagin, who is an open source intelligence analyst and an information warfare researcher at Fake Reporter based in Tel Aviv. Hello, Tal. Thank you for joining me. So what actually happened here?
So the incident has been ongoing in terms of the online different investigations that we've been seeing since the early morning of March 23rd. Now we've received the official report by the IDF. This is the third report that they've released. So they had an initial assessment that they released on April 2nd. Then there was a secondary statement made on April 5th after the New York Times video was published. And this is their final investigation. And the only thing left that we as investigators are waiting for is the autopsy report, the final autopsy report from within Gaza. But at this point, we have most of the information about the events that occurred that day.
Okay, so what do we now know that we didn't know in the previous reports that were released?
So in regard to the statement released by the IDF, there isn't actually much information that it provides in terms of new information. It actually opens a lot of questions. The only new aspect of the information is it's the first time that IDF acknowledges the UN vehicle that was also discussed to have been also buried. And throughout the reports, we saw that there was a UN officer that was killed, but there was no name given. Nobody was really explaining how he had died and what his connection to the incident was. And then now the IDF has acknowledged that he was in the third incident and he was shot upon due to suspicions that the IDF stated that they have. One of the issues that we've had as researchers is that we try to only look at incidents in regard to open source intelligence. So what that means is try to understand what occurred with information that we can verify with third-party sources. In the report now produced by the IDF, we don't have any of that. And that's something that was a bit disappointing to see, that all of the information provided by the IDF is something that we simply have to trust the IDF or precedent. You know, when it talks about ambulances or medical vehicles being used previously by Hamas or other different operative groups, there is precedent for that occurring in the past, but it doesn't prove in this incident that it actually occurred. And then when it identifies, it says that there were 6 Hamas operatives amongst the dead. It doesn't provide even names for those people. And the reason that could be very helpful is there are analysts that are incredibly good at finding the actual profiles of these people and sometimes being able to connect the dots and confirming that they were operatives beyond simply trusting the IDF. So I would say that the issue that this statement by the IDF has from that regard is that if you already support the IDF and you're trusting within its own legal system, then this report is enough for you. But if you're someone who wants to try to prove aspects of the report or understand the full story via information that you can independently verify, then this report doesn't do that.
But the report does say, you know, very, very severe, serious mistakes were made, and that you know, due process will be carried through to make sure that the people responsible for making the mistakes lose their job and are reprimanded in the appropriate manner. So there's an acknowledgement of very, very severe wrongdoing, isn't there?
Yes. So there are, in some aspects, acknowledgement, but there's also information that they, in a sense, don't even discuss, and also it brings up more questions. So, and we don't know whether or not that's because maybe the soldiers in the field didn't provide all the actual factual information that they should have. We know that they didn't in one case, not only because the deputy commander who was reprimanded for this says so in the report, but also in the initial statement on April 2nd, they said that there was no lights and sirens. And then on April 5th, they retracted that once the New York Times statement came out. Additionally, one of the biggest issues in this report is the initial interaction with the ambulance or the vehicle and the IDF. So if we look at the IDF's account of things, there was in their initial statement, they said that there was a firefight between Hamas operatives in a vehicle and the IDF. And then they were killed and the vehicle was at the side of the road, and they killed 1 operative and detained 2. Then later on, they simply said that there was a Hamas vehicle and they shot it up. And in another statement, it's a Hamas police vehicle. So if we take all of these statements together, there was a Hamas vehicle that was fired upon by the IDF, and there was 2 operatives that were taken and detained, and one of them was killed. However, based on the witness testimony of one of the surviving medics, who's named Abid, who we can also corroborate that he was in the first vehicle based on the New York Times video. He was in the vehicle with two other medics. Two medics were killed in that incident. He was the only survivor. And if he was a Hamas operative, then why was he let go later in the day by the state of Israel at 4 p.m.? So that's something that doesn't align. Another issue that we also have.
So may I ask you, Tal,
Yes,
do you think this story, the investigation will continue? That this third bulletin is not going to conclude this, is it?
So I think in a war, especially, there's always the question as to why do militaries need to account for themselves? Why do they need to explain themselves? But in the age of social media where everything is filmed, everything is showcased, at the end of the day, militaries are more and more having to explain themselves. I think that in sometimes different types of reports from the IDF, usually it kind of ends with, if you trust the IDF, you trust their account. If you trust the Palestinian organizations, you trust them, and everyone goes their separate ways. But I think that with this statement by the IDF, there's still so many open questions that the IDF didn't explain in this final report that I think hopefully would encourage the investigators to release a secondary final report that maybe answers those questions.
Well, thank you very much indeed for joining us, and very hard to kind of elucidate what's going on, but you did a good job of it. Thank you.